Thanks, Teresa, and thank you all so much for joining today. It's great to be able to connect with all of you. Feel free, you see on my first slide here, I have my Twitter handle on my slide, or if you prefer to connect with me on LinkedIn or some other social media platform, I'd love to keep in touch with you after our session is over. But what I wanted to do today, I wanted to talk about social media and how it's a way that we get information that's important to us, but it can also be a way that we give information that may be interesting to folks who follow us on social media. And from hearing the ages and the life experience of the people who are on this call, I know that I don't really need to tell you all about the importance of social media. I'm sure that all of you are using it in some shape or form every single day. And you probably have things that you could teach me about social media. But at Comcast, a lot of my job is managing some of our social media handles here at Comcast. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But I also wanted to talk to you all because you're all kind of at this age where what you are consuming on social media and what you're sharing with people on social media is really important, because it is really helping you to develop your brand, your personal brand on social media. And it's something that a lot of people who are a generation or two older than you, we just didn't have that opportunity when we were your age. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So the first thing I wanted to start with, if you look at people your parents' age, your grandparents' age, and you look at the evolution of social media, why is it important? Well, back in 1984, which was before any of you were born, it's actually a time period when I was in high school. Back in 84, that was the year that we had the highest newspaper subscription rate in the country. So in 1984, 63 million people subscribed to a daily newspaper. And when I say daily newspaper, I mean a real daily newspaper where somebody actually delivered a paper copy to your house. I know that a lot of people, even if they are paying to subscribe to a daily paper today, they may be accessing it more from the website than from a paper copy. That has dropped a lot over the years. And so in 2016, it dropped from 63 million down to 34 million. And there are a lot of reasons for that. One reason is that we actually have less daily newspapers. The newspaper industry has gone through a really, really difficult time in recent years. So there are less papers to subscribe to. But then the other thing is that people's habits have just really changed. People are getting their news from other places besides a daily newspaper. Back in 1984, cable television was a very new concept. And so if you look at something like CNN, CNN was the first cable TV network to offer 24-hour news. And that may seem like kind of a no-brainer, but really before that, you only saw the news at certain times of the day, and people would wait until 5 o'clock at night when their local newscast would come on, and they would watch the local news. And then later that night at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, the national news would come on, and that's when you would watch your hour of national news. But that all changed with CNN. And now, besides CNN, we have lots and lots of cable TV options. And then we also obviously have a lot of social media options that we didn't have. So what I wanted to start with, a question for you all. And so I'm wondering if you are able to type into the chat, if you can tell me, where do you get your news? And think of everything, whether it's a newspaper, a particular station that you watch on TV, whether it's a social media platform, which social media platform that is. Where are you getting news, whether it's about Pittsburgh or about things that are going on in the world? And if you could type that into chat, and Janelle, maybe if you could read out a couple of things that people type, that would be great.
Sure, no problem. So we have Samaya has shared mostly through social media like Snapchat and Instagram. Jalen shared, I get my news from social media, mostly Twitter and Facebook. Monet said Instagram and KDKA mostly. Nini, it's Nini, I think, right? And she said Instagram or my mom. Hey, that's a good resource. My dad
Yes.
has great. My dad always has great news updates for me. And Malze shared, in school I got it from CNN 10 and I get it from Instagram.
That's great. Those I am not too surprised at those answers, but I want to show you nationally where people are getting their news right now. And so for those of you on the phone, about 3/4 of the country get their news from Twitter, 74%. And so what that means is that they're waking up in the morning, they're scrolling through their Twitter feed, and they may be following different news outlets in their Twitter feed, and that's the first place that they see particular news stories. 68% of people get their news from Facebook. I don't think any of you mentioned Facebook, and that's because that seems to be a social media platform for old people. YouTube is a growing platform in terms of news content. 32% are getting it from YouTube. Not at all surprised that so many of you said Snapchat, because about a third of us, 29%, are getting it from Snapchat. Right behind it is Instagram at 27% and LinkedIn at 23%. I'm not surprised that I didn't hear from LinkedIn from anybody on the phone, but I would guess that as you get older, graduate from high school, LinkedIn will become a more important platform to you as you get older. And I would encourage you, I did hear that we do have a couple of folks on the call who just finished or are about to finish high school. This is a time, if you haven't already, for you to consider putting together a LinkedIn profile for yourself. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well.
If I can that. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to interject. There were a few more comments. Mesa commented that she usually hears stuff on the radio and through her parents or some of her mentors through her robotics programs, but she doesn't spend much time on it herself. And then we actually do have two of our youth who said that they do actually use Facebook. I agree with you that it is something for older people generally, but not everybody. So thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's good. I'm glad you shared that. Yeah, what I'm finding with Facebook, I have a recent college graduate son and then a daughter who's in college right now. And what I'm finding is that for Facebook users around that age group, Facebook is still a really useful platform for things like Facebook groups. If you are in an organization that needs to be sharing calendar entries or files with each other, or having discussions about different topics. A lot of times I know folks are creating private Facebook groups, and it's a great platform for sharing information that way. I wanted to just share with you, in case any of you are interested, these are the platforms that I'm responsible for in my work. And if you're interested in following us on Twitter, I do manage 2 Twitter handles, one for Western PA, it's called Comcast Western PA. I manage Comcast Central PA. And then if you do follow Comcast on Facebook, any content you see there that looks like it came from Pennsylvania, Ohio, or West Virginia is content that I probably published. And then I also manage a couple of regional websites where I do local content that we then amplify on social media. So this is a time in all of your lives where you may have, I'm guessing you all have probably used social media for a big portion of your lives. And, when we first start using social platforms, a lot of times we don't really give a whole lot of thought about the content that we actually post. And you may, be saying things or posting things that you think may be funny or maybe a little bit provocative. But as you get older, it's really important that the content that you share or are retweeting or are giving credit for, that it's really a good reflection on who you are. And we read every day about different celebrities who, even if it wasn't content that they created themselves, if they are amplifying creators who may be a little provocative, it can get them into hot water. So it's really just the difference between putting out content that makes you look as if you are somebody who really has your act together and knows what you're talking about, or somebody who is just kind of a hot mess and will share content that could really make people upset or cause a reaction from people. So I'm sure not the first time any of you have heard that before, that we just have to really be cautious with the content that we're putting out there to make sure that we aren't getting ourselves into hot water. I mentioned LinkedIn because, like I said, it may be a platform that you're not using a whole lot in your life yet, but I really would encourage you to think about creating a platform before you graduate from high school. Believe it or not, there is a lot of relevant experience that you probably have that you may not think is important for people to know about, but it really is. And if you create a LinkedIn profile, it's a good way to be able to start developing a professional network before you're even finished with high school. And like I said, if you do create one and you want to send me a LinkedIn request, I would be happy to accept it and to continue to introduce you to other folks who may be doing things or working in industries that you really would like to know more about. So, your LinkedIn profile at this stage in your life and your career journey, it doesn't have to have a lot of content, but it probably needs to have a couple of basics. One is definitely having a professional looking photo of yourself. So that means, no selfies, where you're wearing casual clothes, or you can tell that it's being shot in your bedroom or with your best friend. It should just be a photo of you yourself. If you need somebody else to take it for you, that's always a safe bet, because when you try to take one of yourself, usually the angle will be a little bit distorted. So I'd encourage you to really take some time to make sure that you take a photo of yourself that has really good lighting, where you're wearing something professional. It doesn't have to be a business suit, but I would, stay away from something too casual. And make sure that when you create a little description for yourself, that you are just writing it with very professional language, no slang or abbreviations. Whatever you have in your Snapchat bio or your Instagram bio, it might not be appropriate. You want to really just include the basics, like where you are going to school or what high school you graduated from, your city. It's always good to have your location, because that makes it easier when you are searching for jobs through LinkedIn for the job search to target you geographically. And if you do know people who you have worked with in the past, or teachers, guidance counselors, former managers at jobs that you may have had or have right now, don't be afraid to connect with them. I would say that with LinkedIn, the rules behind following or connecting with people, it's different than probably most of your social media platforms. I think that with LinkedIn, people are very generous in terms of their willingness to help you get connected with other people. And they'll be able to recognize right away that you are somebody just kind of entering their career journey. And I think you would be really surprised at how willing people are to help connect you with people, to talk to you about their own company or the industry that they work in, and to share job leads if you know that they may be a good mechanism to learn more about a particular position at a company. So I'd really encourage you to get onto LinkedIn. And if you are developing a profile and you ever want some feedback, like I said, if you connect with me on LinkedIn and you want to just send me a message and say, hey, could you just take a look at my profile and see if there's anything you can think of that I should add or change, I am more than happy to do that. I want to do whatever I can to help position you well for the next step in your journey. Another thing that I encourage friends and employees to do on their other social platforms, so that's everything else, that's Instagram or Twitter or Snapchat or TikTok, is to decide what your narrative is that you want people to consider you to be the expert about, or know that you're somebody who really knows a lot about this issue or is very passionate about this issue, and that's why I want to follow this person. So this is actually, it's a worksheet that I put together for my coworkers. So that's why the first box up on the upper left says, what is your role at Comcast? But this can be applied to anybody, no matter where you are in your career journey. So if you think about what your role is at your job, or what your role is in your community, maybe you are in a volunteer organization through your school or your church, and you're doing something in that organization that you're really, really passionate about. Or maybe you just have an interest that is what gets you up in the morning and gets you really excited, and you'd love to share that enthusiasm for with other people. I see this a lot on TikTok. For those of you who use TikTok, you'll see that some creators are very, very focused on a particular interest. Right now, I've started following creators who happen to be Native Americans, and they're really passionate about their Native American culture. And so some of these creators, they'll do videos where they will show different Native American dances that they do. Or I know some of the Native creators I'm following right now are Inuit. So they live in Alaska, and they will talk about Inuit food traditions and different tools that they use to, you know, skin seals, or to harvest whale blubber. You know, it sounds like something really far away from what we do here in Pittsburgh every day, but that's what their passion is. And so their entire narrative on TikTok is just about that passion, about their love for Native American culture. So that's something, and like I said, I think TikTok is a really good platform for that. If you have a passion and you want to really clearly define it to that one thing, that's a really good platform to use to do that. And kind of taking some time to actually write this out using, it could be a format like this, or, just in a journal, kind of writing out, what do I bring to the table? What are some unique experiences that I have that people might be interested in? Or what knowledge do I have that might be helpful to share with other people? That can really help you to define what you want that social media platform to look like for yourself. The other thing to think about is what tone you want to use on that platform. There are some folks who I follow, especially on Twitter, who are kind of snarky, a little bit irreverent, and they can get away with it because, maybe they are a comedian, or, because of who they're trying to position themselves as. But I would argue that those are few and far between. I would say that for the most part, what we're putting out there on these platforms, we really have to be thoughtful about how it would make people feel. And then, especially as you're getting into the job market, you want to really be thinking about the fact that there may be people seeing your content that don't really know you, and they may be considering hiring you for a position, and they may be, looking up your social media platforms to get a better sense of who they are. And so if they're seeing things that make them feel bad, or they think are a little over the top, it may make them think twice about whether they might want to work with you. But I think what I'm seeing right now is that people who can make people feel good, whether it is just being fun and creating content that's really engaging and funny and humorous without poking fun at people, that's getting a lot of engagement. Or people feeling good about a difficulty that they may be going through and trying to be enthusiastic and build people up. That gets a lot of engagement as well. And anytime you can create content like that and make it in a way that is unique to you, that's always a good idea. So before I go to the next slide, again, in the chat, if you have access and can type in the chat, I would really like to hear what your favorite social media platforms are that you use on a regular basis. And like I said, for me right now, I think one of my favorites is TikTok. I also love Twitter. I'm seeing a couple of folks who said Instagram. I like Instagram a lot as well. Another TikTok lover. TikTok and Instagram. And Instagram, I'm seeing more and more creators who are doing things on Instagram that are not just the traditional visuals. So creating memes that they're using as visuals rather than just straight up photography. And I'm going to be talking about that in a minute as well. So thank you all for sharing that. That gives me, I always like to, when I speak to groups, I always like to get an idea of what platforms they are using to just kind of verify in my mind my assumptions about what different age demographics are really using. And you all kind of confirmed what I thought you might be interested in. So I wanted to give a couple of examples of folks who I think really have this idea down in terms of developing a personal narrative for their social media platforms. One is Susan Jen Davis. Susan works for Comcast. She is our Chief Sustainability Officer. So she is the head of all of Comcast's sustainability efforts. whether that's things we're doing internally, like trying to become a zero waste company within a certain period of time, or things like volunteer projects. When we do Comcast Cares Day, a lot of those projects have an environmental focus to them. And if you follow Susan on Twitter, you'll see that that passion about sustainability and environmentalism, almost all of her content is focused just on that. And she will either create original content or retweet interesting stories about things that companies are doing in the sustainability space. And it's really kind of cemented her reputation as being really an expert in sustainability within the tech industry. Another person who you all may have heard of, she's a local Pittsburgher, Leah Lizarrando. Leah is the head of 412 Food Rescue, if any of you are familiar with the 412 Food Rescue app. And she is really focused on food waste and hunger issues. And her content, again, on her social platforms, it really is focused on those issues and how we can solve issues related to hunger, and how technology can be a part of the solution. I think we've talked a lot about some of the rules of the road when it comes to social media. I would just say that, you know, like anything, once you put content out there, you can always expect reactions from people, and sometimes it'll be negative, but I would say that that isn't something that should necessarily scare you off. I know that for me right now, I have recently dipped my toe into TikTok and am focusing on racial justice issues. And some of the comments that I've gotten have been negative, and that's okay. It helps to just affirm for me that this is an important issue, and that the folks who may be commenting negatively just may have a lot to learn, and that's why I'm creating the content. And really, you know, you all, I'm sure, see this every day, that social media is a way to really make big impacts in terms of issues, in terms of motivating people. If you see what's been happening over the past month and a half in terms of protests that are happening all over the country, a lot of that is driven primarily through social media and by people sharing information. So there's a lot of power behind it, and when you are looked at as somebody who is a subject matter expert, people come to you for good information, and that's why it's important to make sure that it's always accurate and timely. I would also just encourage you, as you are either consuming content or sharing content, to keep some of these rules in mind. You'll see that sometimes when you're, especially on Twitter, you'll scroll through your news feed, and you may see headlines that news organizations use that have really sensational headlines. And, you know, we refer to that as clickbait. You have to always never just go by what the headline of a story says and repeat that. You always have to actually read the story itself, because a lot of times headlines are written in a way just to get people to read it. And I see this all the time, where people are repeating on social media a headline that they read, but it's clear that they didn't actually read the entire story. It's also really important, especially when you're following news sources, to really understand who those sources are. There are new ones every day that really are not legitimate news sources. So before you reshare content, always make sure that you are familiar with the news source and that it's a legitimate news source. If a story sounds too good to be true, it probably is. A really good source to confirm what we would call urban legends would be to go to Snopes.com to confirm whether a story is actually a rumor is true or not. And it's always a good idea to try to stay positive and not just generate content that sounds unemotional or robotic. So when you're trying to think of what kind of tone you should use in your content, those are 2 rules to go by. I'd also suggest, you know, when people start to, when something blows up on social media and you see a lot of haters commenting on something, even if you know that your point of view is the right point of view, sometimes it's better just to walk away and let the flames go without you getting into the middle of it. And then I did just want to throw up there some of the resources. I'm sure a lot of these are ones that you all may be using and may be familiar with, but these are some of the resources that I use in creating social media memes. They're all free. The one on the bottom right, which you may not be able to see because of the way our screen sharing is, Ceev, C-E-E-V, is a resume builder. It's a free resume builder that makes your resume just look beautiful. Another option, though, for a good resume builder, again, is just LinkedIn. Once you have a LinkedIn profile, you can actually just click a button and download a resume for yourself. But resources for free images are things like Unsplash, Pixabay, and then using something like Canva to create social media memes is another really great free resource that I use a lot. And then if you are managing social media accounts for organizations, I would guess that there may be some of you out there who may be doing that for different school clubs that you're in or other organizations. And TweetDeck is a really easy and free way to be able to do that. And then I would also just suggest Grammarly as a way, like, especially if you're creating content for a platform like Facebook, where it's longer form content. You might want to just take whatever you're writing and put it through Grammarly before you actually publish it to make sure that there aren't any grammar mistakes. So with that, I am going to stop sharing, and I did want to open it up for any questions that any of you all had, or if there's anything that you'd like to learn more about. And it can be about what I talked about today, or if you have any questions about Comcast, Teresa is also here, and the 2 of us would be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Joe. I just want to remind everybody to, you know, have your cameras on and be with us here in the last few minutes of this space. So eyes on the screen, so Joe knows who she's talking to. We talk about that a lot in our sessions, that sort of growing professionalism in the virtual space. So this is going to be good practice. But Jalen, go for it. Unmute your mic and ask your question. Okay.
Okay, so I noticed that it said that we need to have like some kind of professional photo. What would be an example of like professional clothing if we don't have like a suit or clothes like that?
Yeah, that's not a problem at all, Jalen. I would just suggest, even if you want to do a t-shirt, to have it be a plain t-shirt without anything printed on it. Or if you have just a collared shirt, a shirt that has a collar, whether that's a polo shirt or a button-down shirt, if any of those options are fine. I just, you know, I wouldn't do a casual t-shirt that has some kind of an image on it. And then I would just make sure that you are aware of your background. Like Teresa right now, I think if we sent her screenshot to rate my Zoom room, she would be the winner today. She's got this nice screen in her background, but even just a plain wall behind you is fine. If you can avoid a white wall, that's probably good. Have a little bit of contrast. That makes it look a little bit more interesting if you have a different colored wall. Or even, you know, like Samaya, I love your background. You know, it looks like Samaya's in a very pretty living room that has a nice shelf in the background there. So that I would just, those are my suggestions, is, you know, make sure your background is okay. Don't stress too much about what you're wearing, and then just make sure that it's well lit.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Well, I'll ask some questions. Emily had given me a list of other types of questions, so I'm trying to come up that they don't really exactly apply to this. But I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to, you know, when employers are considering you, how often do they, I mean, like, talk a little bit more about how they look for your social media. How does that happen? Do employers actually go online and research your social media and look to see sort of what you're posting and what you're putting out there? If you could just kind of expand on that a little bit more, because I think that's something that that we all sort of need to think about, especially as they transition from, you know, being a teenager, being in high school, and then moving into whatever their, you know, plans are post high school.
That's a great question, Janelle. So I'll tell you, the short answer is yes, they definitely look at your social media. I know that a lot of us, for that reason, might lock down our social media to private, or, you know, if right now you're using a Finsta, they may not immediately find you. But that being said, I will tell you that unfortunately there have been a number of times as the social media manager in an organization where customers of my company have found employees on social media who have said or done things that were inappropriate. Okay.
Sorry, Joe. Mariah, can you make sure your phone is muted? And Malze, can we get your full attention up here, please? Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. I unfortunately don't have the power to mute her, so I'm
That's
not sure.
okay.
All right, we'll just keep going.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, I would say, you know, to keep that in mind, that even if you're not in the job market, you probably, once you're working, you probably have coworkers who are following you on social media, or there may be customers who are following you on social. And like I said, unfortunately, there are several times where I have been in a situation where I've had to verify that an employee was who somebody thought they were, and they lost their jobs because of things that they said or you know, did on social media that were inappropriate. And it doesn't even have to be about the company itself. You know, if your company says, you know what, these are what our values are, and what you were doing here is just not in line with our values, that's reason enough for them to not keep you as an employee. So, you know, I would say to just keep that in mind, especially as you're getting into the job market.
Would you say, because I'm also of the age where when I was applying for college, there was no social media. So for those students who are considering or wanting to go to higher ed, would you kind of apply the same rules or the same thought process to the social media accounts?
Definitely. There actually, this summer, there have been a couple of instances that I've read about where students, they just graduated from high school, they have already been accepted to a particular college, and then they said things over the summer that had their offers revoked from their colleges. And when I say they said things, you know, this summer, you know, all of us on this call have been following what has happened since George Floyd's death. And so, you know, if a college says, you know, Black Lives Matter, we value diversity, and then a student who they offered a scholarship to is saying things that are racially insensitive, that's not a good look for that college. And they are going to say, I'm sorry, we are going to ask you not to come here. So yeah, college is another, you know, that's a whole another can of worms. I know that, you know, a good rule of thought, if you are planning to go to college and as you're posting things on social, one thing that I'll recommend is never, ever, ever post photos of yourself with alcohol in them. Just don't do it, no matter how funny or cute you think it is, because, you know, unfortunately, 4 years from now, when you're graduating and you're ready to apply for that first professional position, somebody somewhere is going to find that goofy photo that you really wish weren't still in somebody's Instagram feed.
And then I know you gave a couple of insights on resume writing, and I know we're about to wrap up, but if besides LinkedIn, what's like a really good resource as you start the process of writing a resume? Just finding templates online, or is there a specific site? I know you had mentioned LinkedIn, and maybe you did mention one other as well. I just wanted to kind of give them some resources as they start to build up their resumes.
Sure. So the other resource I mentioned on the call was CEEV. That's spelled CEEV, and that stands for CV, which is if you are in the academic world, instead of calling it a resume, they call it a CV, a curriculum vitae. So CEEV is a free platform that will make your resume look really nice. But there are templates in Google. If you have a Google Drive and go into your Google Drive, you should see some options for different templates. And there are a few really nice resume templates. I wouldn't worry too much about making them look too fancy. It really is the content that's important, because a lot of times, just to give you a little peek behind the scenes on how job searches work, a lot of that is automated. So when you see a job, whether it's in Monster or Indeed or some other online job platform, and you go to apply for it, you're uploading your resume, you're putting in some basic information about who you are, and then you know, a computer is taking all that information and seeing if it has certain keywords in it. And then it's sending those resumes to a real person, you know, on the other side and saying, hey, these 10 resumes are from people who we think have the right work experience. And it's, you know, a lot of times just because of the right words that you used in describing your jobs. So I really would recommend, if you haven't written a resume before and it's your first time going through it, or even if you maybe have one, but it really is just your high school experience and you're ready for that next resume for after high school, I really would recommend that you take it and have somebody else take a look at it. Have an adult who's been in the workforce take a look at it, because they just are probably more familiar with the best ways to describe those experiences. Or they may think about things that you don't think are relevant at all. And they may say, you know what, you forgot about these 2 classes that you took in high school that you just looked at as, you know, a big deal. These were requirements, I had to take them, but they're kind of unusual and it kind of differentiates you from other potential applicants. Or they may remember volunteer experience that you've had that you thought, it's not a big deal. I just like doing that on Saturdays, but it's actually very relevant and will, again, differentiate you from other people of the same age, same experience when they're considering who to hire.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. I think you've given a lot of really valuable information. I don't know. I guess we'll get your contact info and have it available for everybody. But with that, we do only have about 5 more minutes before their next session today. So I want to give them a chance to, you know, stretch their limbs and grab something to drink or use the bathroom before we keep them on again. But Joe, I really appreciate it. We as an organization appreciate it. I'll pass it over to Emily real quick. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I was listening into both of our 2 calls that we have going on. Just appreciate all of the information that you shared, and especially the offer to, you know, if when our youth turn 16 and can make their LinkedIn accounts, to be able to reach out to you to look at those. That is wonderful. And yes, thank you. That is so generous. And so thank you for sharing your time with us. And yes, we will. I will be passing your contact info to all of them via email, so that you all have Ms. Joe's contact info. So thank you so much.
All right. Bye.